So if you've listened to me at all this year, then you know that back on March 20th of this year, I had a really a transformational experience with God. And it all came out of tremendous frustration. Back in March, before that, Jesus, if you know anything about what Jesus said, Jesus was once asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, well, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I was supposed to preach on that Sunday, March 23rd, and I had put my message together, but the reality was I was incredibly frustrated because the truth is, up until that point, I didn't know how to love him anymore. And it's the most important thing. Love God with all of who you are. And I couldn't honestly tell any of you that next Sunday, oh, I've made so much progress in this. The truth was I didn't love him any more than the week before, or the week before, or the month before, or the year before. And I was like, what is this all about? What is this about? And I was so frustrated, but I still had to stand up and say something. So it was Thursday. I'd prepped most of my message, and it was Thursday night, and I was just in my office, and I decided to clean my office, and I put on a YouTube video by this guy, Dallas Willard, and I've told you this before. This is the very video I watched, considering the whole person, heart, soul, mind, strength, and neighbor. And so Dallas was this brilliant, brilliant theologian, passed away in 2013, I believe. He was just so profound, and I just had it on as I was cleaning my office, and all of a sudden, he started saying some things that I have never heard my entire life as a Christian, 40 years of following Jesus, and I started learning things that I had never, ever learned before. I was so overwhelmed by what I learned that night that I scrapped my message, rewrote an entire new message, an entire new series that I ended up teaching for 8 straight weeks from March 23rd on. The most important series I've ever done. I've literally said many times, you could delete every other message I've ever done, just keep those 8 messages and that'd be all you need to know. Because of how much my life changed. I started immediately being more aware of the presence of God, which is supposed to be really significant. In the New Testament, there's this verse where he's like, when you're in need, don't worry because you have my presence. It's like, that's supposed to matter to us. Do you know what it's like to sense the presence of God with you? To have him with you. And peace and joy and power. Things started to change in my life that I have never, ever been able to change, despite all my years of working at it. Nothing. I started having experiences with God, and so many of them that I opened up a folder on my laptop, and I just called it My Experiences with God. And I started tracking every single week. Oh my goodness, what did I see God do this week? And what did I see God do this week? And my joy just was incredible. So March, April, May, June, these months, I just filled that folder week after week with experiences. There was never a week where I wasn't like, oh my goodness, let me type about what I just experienced. And I told many of those stories in those 4 months. And then July came, and I had only one of those. And then August came, and I had none, and things started to change. Slowly, what I began to experience was the opposite. I began to experience stress and struggle and failure and anxiety and anger and fear. And I got angry at God, quite honestly, because I'm like, what, is this bait and switch? It's like literally you let me have all these amazing adventures with you, and then all of a sudden you're like pulling it away? So how many of you think the problem was God, by the way? Yeah. It all came to a tipping point last Sunday after church was over. A friend of mine in the church came up to me and said, I got to tell you this amazing story and this adventure with God. It was an incredible story about God and what he had done. And he said, I'm only telling this because, you have these too. And in my head, I'm like, I used to. And I was like, what is going on? And instantly I had this impression in my mind, and it was, go back and watch your message from Easter. Well, I never rewatch my messages. Never. But it was a part of that whole series, that Come Alive series. And so I ignored it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And finally Wednesday, I just was so dissatisfied that I woke up that morning. I got up early, and my habit is I get up really early so that I can do all my message prep before I go to my full-time job. So I'd gotten up super early to work on my message, and I'm like, fine, I'll listen to me. And so I put that on as I was just getting ready in the morning, making my coffee and doing my things before I started working on my sermon for this Sunday, a sermon that you will not hear today. Because it was not long into that message when all of a sudden I was just keenly aware of a huge mistake I had made. I'd made a change that I didn't know. I wasn't conscious that I was making this change, but I made this change. And everything had shifted back to this list. And the moment I heard myself talking about it, I'm like, oh no, what have I done? And so I immediately repented, told God I was sorry, turned back to him in the way I knew I needed to, and immediately the presence of God was back, and the peace of God was back, and his love and life change and personal interaction with God. And it was amazing. It was really amazing. It's interesting. I'm reading through 1 Peter right now, my personal quiet time, and there's this verse at the end of 1 Peter 1, and it says that you can taste that the Lord is good. So if I were to ask you if these cookies are good, you can guess. But if I gave you a cookie and you tasted that it was good, right? You could now tell me, oh, that's good. That God doesn't want you to have personal information about him. He wants you to have personal interaction with him. Many of you have information about God from a whole lifetime of attending church and doing all this religious stuff. Great. How's that going for you? He wants you to taste that he is good, to personally interact with him. So this is kind of I did it wrong, and it's time, and it's back again, and kind of a message that's really strange. But if you're frustrated with how your life is going, or if you're sitting here today secretly wishing that you had more personal interaction with God, then this is the right sermon. So here's what we're doing. We're finishing this series called Everyday Disciple, and I'm going to talk to you about how to have experienced God's life-changing grace. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to go back and I'm going to summarize what I talked about 8 months ago. And then I'm going to show you my mistake and hopefully help you avoid ever making this mistake. And a big part of it, hopefully, is that I avoid myself ever making this mistake again. So I'm being real honest with you about this. This is like personal therapy in front of you all. So please open your program, take out the notes, grab your notes. They should look like this. There'll be a bunch of things I want to ask you to write down. Welcome to those of you who are watching online, like at YouTube. We're so glad you're watching. If you go to our website at Peniel Church Life, you can get these notes too. So let's jump right into this. So here's what I talked about 8 months ago. You have to understand God's offer of grace. This is what you have to understand. So that means we need to understand what grace is. So here's the definition. It's not on your notes, but it's this. Grace is God's power in my life doing what I could never do. Now, somewhere on your notes, would you write the word grace and power? Grace equals power. That's what it is. Grace equals power. It's God's power in your life doing things you could never, ever do on your own. If you could do it, that's not grace, that's just effort. Go do it. Like none of you, if I stand up here and say, look, today I tied my shoes, are going to say, oh, praise the grace of God. Celebrate the grace of God, right? Because I'm fully capable of doing that, right? So that's not grace. It's just effort. It's just your earning, right? So grace is God's power doing in my life what I could never do. Now, in the Bible, there are two main, in my opinion, two main forms of grace. The first one is this. It's saving grace. It's the activity of God that brings about our salvation. We are only saved by grace, period. We do not earn it. We don't deserve it. He gives it to us. Now, I talk about that a lot. I'm not talking about that today. I did talk about that 8 months ago when I brought this up. But today, I really want to pivot to the other kind of grace, and that's this. It's transforming grace. Because many of you, like me, have made the mistake in your spiritual life where we started with grace, the grace of his salvation, and then turned all to effort. All to earning, all to what you have to do. So transforming grace is this. It's the ongoing process by which God's power changes us into people who naturally live out the values and character of Jesus. So in other words, he changes us. His grace gives me the power to do what Jesus did, and not only that, to be like Jesus internally. That's what he does. That's what transforming grace is. He changes us externally, internally. That's what he does. So let me explain this. So there are two ways this shows up. First are in amazing displays of God's power. Amazing displays of God's power. So look at this verse from Acts chapter 6, verse 8. Now Stephen, a man full of God's, what? Would you underline those words on your notes? Grace and power. Performed great wonders and signs among the people. Remember what I said? I want you to associate grace with one word. Power. It's the power of God to do things in your life you could never do. That's what you see in the Bible when people were encountering the grace of God, is things changed. Think about this. So I talk all the time about George Mueller, right? He cared for 10,000 orphans in his lifetime in the 1800s with no money. Is that possible humanly? If all of a sudden we gave you 10,000 children to care for and you had no income, would you be okay or in big, big trouble tomorrow? Right? There's no chance you can do that on your own. That's grace. Grace is God's power showing up in your life, doing things you could never do on your own. So this is the way it shows up. It's like, wow, it's amazing. So my question, do you see the power of God at work through your life into this world? That's the first part of this. That's what transforming grace brings. The world changes around us. But that's not all, and maybe not even the most important part of it. There is inner transformation of my character. There's inner transformation of my character. And not by effort. This is what I have to emphasize again and again. Let's say, and I'm going to make you think about this in a different way. Let's say that on a 10 scale, we take the characteristic of patience. Are you a patient person? You don't have to answer out loud, just think. On a 1 to 10, how patient are you? Patient, 10 being like Jesus and me. Whew, super patient. Or 1 being like, I got no patience at all, right? So let's say that you're at a 3 on a 10 scale. Overall patience. Okay, this is not the message of Christianity. Work really, really hard to be more patient, even though that is a constant command in the Bible, right? Be more patient, add more patience, be patient, wait on the Lord. Okay, all these things are great. So you're like, okay, I'm going to take Jesus' command seriously. I'm going to be more and more patient. So you work super duper hard. You make that little 3 go up to like 3.00001. Have you experienced the grace of God? No, you've just worked. Good luck. That's not the message of Christianity, but that's the message that we've settled for. Transforming grace is God giving me his character through personal interaction with him. These verses, by the way, are some of the most important verses in the New Testament. 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. Let me show you what he says. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him. Now, 3 parts to that. First off, whose power? Your power or divine power? God's power, right? And what is God's power offering us? Look at that. Everything we need for a godly life. Is that what you feel like you have? You're like, oh, Brian, I have everything I need for a godly life. This godly life thing is so easy. It's so easy to be godly with my spouse, godly at work with those people, godly with my boss. God, it's just so easy to react in a godly way in every circumstance, right? Well, he says this is what's available, divine power, to live a fully godly life. And how? Through a knowledge of him. And this is the word that screws us up, because knowledge, when we think of knowledge, we think of information, right? That's what we think of. You have information. So all you need is some more information about God. That's not what this is. There are 2 types of knowledge in the Bible. One is information, and one is personal interaction with God. Think of it. You know the story of Joseph when Joseph finds out that Mary is going to have a baby? And you know what Joseph does? It says he does not know Mary until after the baby's born. Does that mean he's like, who is this Mary person? I've forgotten her. No, it means no personal interaction with her. And over again in the Bible, that's the main use of the word knowledge when it comes to God. I want you to lock that in the back of your mind. When you read knowledge in the Bible, knowledge of God, he's saying, so this is what it's saying, you can have God's power to make, so that you can live a godly life through personal interaction with God. That's what that verse is saying. What will be the outcome? Well, he's given us his very great and precious promises so that through them you can, look at this, participate in the divine nature. So whose nature will you suddenly start to experience in your life? Your nature? No, the offer from God is amazing. Isn't this promise amazing? That you and I can have access to God's power. Remember what grace is. Grace is one word. It is the word power, right? So his power makes it possible for us to live a whole kind of life, different life through interaction with him, so we can literally participate in the divine nature. In other words, people should be saying about Brian all the time, oh my goodness, by the grace of God, I see Brian becoming more self-controlled. They should be saying this about you if you follow Jesus. So much more self-controlled, so much more kind, so much more gentle, patient, loving. And again, because you've worked super hard to just raise these values inside of you. Is that the message of the New Testament? God, by his power, lets you share his nature. He puts his nature in you. Now, do you earn that? Do you deserve it? So then we're talking about grace, right? This is transforming grace. It is the true message of Christianity is not, hey, receive his saving grace and then work super duper hard to try and fix all that's wrong in your life. And that's what I thought it was for a long, long time. You know what that turns you into? A legalistic hypocrite. Because do you have the power to live a godly life? And listen, I've tried 40 years. Absolutely, I don't have the power to live a godly life. I've tried, and I can't do it. The message of Christianity is a message of grace from beginning to end, God's power. Christianity is all about God doing in our lives what we could never do on our own, ever. Ever. You can chase that if you want to. You're chasing your own tail. So the question is this what you have? Do you have grace? And the bigger question, is it what you want? Would you like to know what it's like to live daily participating with God? Where you see his power changing things through you and in you that you could never change. If you want that, that's the offer. Good news. That is the offer of Christianity. Participation in the divine nature. So, how do you do it? Well, you got to identify your gaps. You got to identify your gaps. So this promise is amazing. So we have to know what our gaps are. And so if I were to ask you a couple of questions today, so do you need grace today? It's amazing that there are many, many Christians who would say, no, not really. Not really. Because of how much we have just downgraded what Jesus asked us to do. If I were to say, do you need his power to change something in your life, something in the lives of someone you care about? Okay, yeah, maybe you do that. So here's what I put together about 8 months ago. I showed you this chart only one time. And these are just some of what God has clearly communicated in the Bible, or his expectations for us. And I'm going to show you, honestly, how far my strength and my willpower has helped me achieve the goal of what God has given. Let me give you one. So the Bible 2 times in the New Testament says, always be humble. Twice. Always be humble. So there's my best effort at achieving always being humble in my life. There it is. Made it a long way, didn't I? Real good. Now, my wife isn't here today. She's with the grandkids, but she might say, Brian, I think you're overinflating that a little bit. So I did not run it by her, right? But, oh boy. All right, so that's what my strength has accomplished in my life. God says, always be humble. Evaluate yourself. Do you have a gap? Would the people around you say that you have a gap in humility? Are you always humble? Are you always humble? You know, one of the best tests in American society right now is how do you respond when somebody of the opposite political party shares their views harshly? Is there humility in your response? Yeah, sorry, I had to use a real one. All right, here we go. How about this one? Forgive your enemies. Now, look at how confident I was 8 months ago. Darn. So then a while, not that long ago, I ran into somebody who had deeply harmed some of the people that I love the most in life. And I thought I was doing so good till I was in the room with them. And then all of a sudden, because here's what the command actually is. It is not forgive your enemies, although that's part of it. It's actually love your enemies. That's a whole step beyond forgiving them, isn't it? Matter of fact, you know what Jesus actually said? Do good to them. How many of you are like, that's me, Brian, every day. I just love my enemies, forgive them, can't wait to do good to them. See, what we've done in Christianity is we've redefined what Jesus said to be what we do. rather than what he actually said. Look at what he actually said and evaluate yourself. Do you have a gap there? That bar is inflated. I'm not that high. Rid yourself of anger. Did you know that's a command in the book? I believe it's Colossians. He said, get rid of anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Get rid of it. No anger, no rage, no slander. Nothing malicious towards another human being ever. How you doing on that one? Right? Never angry? Not going to be angry this afternoon after the Packer game, right? So here we go. I'm sorry. Never worry. Oh my goodness. One of Jesus' constant ones, right? Consider the lilies of the field. Consider the birds of the air. Do you worry? Are you worried about anything today? You see, what we do is we just keep downplaying everything Jesus said. We just ignore what he said and just settle for the life that we have rather than, being honest about the gaps that we have. Always be gentle, live with complete purity in this world. Never complain, ever. It's about to get cold. I promise I'm going to blow that 1,000,000 times. January hasn't even come and I'm already complaining. All right. And then I don't even want to touch this one. In 1 Peter, it says, be holy as he is holy, right? Okay, so this is the reality. Anyone want to deny that their chart looks something like this? And these are just a few of the things that Jesus has said that we need to do. So the reality is, what Jesus has asked is here, my best effort has got me here. So there's an enormous gap, isn't there? Is there a gap in your life? Anyone want to claim something different than that? Because you can have my job. So come on up, I'll sit there. But the reality is, there's a huge gap. And so I showed you an example. I showed you this about 8 months ago. This is my grandson, Everett. He decided to go out and play some basketball one day. So here's how that went. And as you can see, he's at the time of this video about 18 months old. Watch what happened. If Everett had spent the whole day out there, was he ever going to make a shot? Nope, never, right? Never. This is what we look like when we attempt to do what Jesus said in our own strength. Hey, Brian, forgive your enemies and love them from the heart and do good to them. And here goes Brian. Right? Always be humble. Be kind to everyone. Do good to those who hate you. And our best efforts are pathetically short, right? We're not even close. I'm not even close. And I was never meant to be. Because the gap reveals my need for grace. That's what this is showing me. In every area where I'm short, I need grace because I cannot do what he's asked. Now, here's my next question. If God showed up on the basketball court with my grandson Everett and said, hey, Everett, I want you to try again. This time, I'm going to help you. The creator of the universe. If the creator of the universe stepped on the court with Everett and said, try again, I'll help you, will the ball go through the hoop? Oh, every time. Will anyone attribute that to Everett? No. We'll attribute it to who it belongs to, God. By the way, that's what he wants to do through you. It's to bring you to this point where his grace shows up in your life so people aren't going, oh my goodness, Brian, is Brian amazing? No, they're saying, look at this amazing God who does such incredible things. This is what he wants, is that he would use us in this way because he's the God of the gaps. He's the God of the gaps. Every gap in your life, every gap in my life, he wants to fill with his divine power so that we can do what he asks us to do, not in our own strength. As a matter of fact, I was so struck by something recently. I was reading, and Jesus, it's the story where Jesus, every time we do a child dedication, I quote this verse to you. It's like Jesus is sitting there one day, and these people bring their children to Jesus to bless them, and the disciples are like, he doesn't have time for kids, and Jesus is indignant. He's angry. He's like, bring them to me. And he prays a prayer of blessing, and he says, the kingdom of God is like such as these children. What do children do when they have a need? When a child is hungry, my 18-month-old grandson, when he's hungry, does he go, I need to go get a job, right? I need to get a job so I can put some food on the table. No, what does a child do? Mom, what's for dinner? Mom, right? That's what they do. And he's like, it's in this turning to God that we get to live in the power of God in this world. That's what he wants. Look at what he says. Here's what we're supposed to do. Let us come boldly to the throne of our, what kind of God is he? Gracious. And there you get two things. You get his mercy, and what do we find? We find grace. And what's the one word I want you to associate with grace? Power. When we need it most. Okay. So what do we do with all this? What do we do with our gaps? Christians in America are classic for ignoring them, right? Or pretending like we don't have any. We look so wonderful when we do this. Or making everyone else's gaps our focus, right? Oh, you do this. And we look down on people and judge people. For goodness sakes. None of this. What we do is we surrender our gaps with celebration. This is what we learn to do. We surrender our gaps with celebration. And this is where everything turns, right here. We surrender our gaps with celebration. You know, of all the videos I could have clicked on March 20th, I clicked on the one that I absolutely needed to hear. Among the many things I heard that night, he asked this question, do you know God's address? One of my favorite things I've ever learned. You know where God always is? You know where he always is? At the end of your rope. That's where he always is. That's why some of you never encounter him in a personally interactive way, is because you are stubborn and you don't get to the end of your rope. And you won't let go. But it's only at the end of your rope that you get to really experience him. So I didn't know how to apply this, but as I was listening that night, I was so overwhelmed that I literally took this scrap of paper. This is the actual scrap that was sitting on my desk, coffee stains and all, and I wrote at the top, I wrote these words. I said, listen, here's the truth, God. I'm powerless and I need grace. And I wrote what I call my gap list. And on my gap list, I put anything that I've learned in my life I cannot do on my own. The gaps that I showed you on that other chart, I cannot love God with all of who I am. I know it, 40 years trying. I've never even made any progress at it. Not only have I not made it from like a 3 to a 3.00001, I haven't moved it at all. I know I can't do this. I cannot do what Jesus asks in this area of my life. I can't love him this way. I can't make myself humble. I can't live in a world as impure with this, with purity, because the word actually is absolute purity. I can't forgive from my heart. I can't stop trying to look good in front of others. I mean, all these things that I'm so aware of. And so I started my own gap list, and these are just some. And then I literally, on one of these, I wrote, my willpower and strength will never be enough to do any of these things. And so I started to surrender them to God. Every day I would say, here's the gap, God, and I would just go right through my gap list. And I'm turning to you for grace, because remember what his offer is? You get to participate in the divine nature. That's his offer. You can have his nature inside of you. I can't wait to see how you bridge this gap. And I would pray this prayer every morning as I prayed through the things that I knew that historically were the things that tripped me up the most. But then I discovered something else that was really fun. I started watching for triggers during my day. So I would do these two things with the gaps in my life spiritually. I would pray that before I would go to work, and then during the day I would watch for triggers. And a trigger is anything that triggers you, makes you feel angry, scared, frustrated, upset, worried, or nervous. So think through your last week. Was there ever a time last week where you felt stressed? Was there ever a time last week where you felt angry, upset, worried about anything? That was an opportunity to move to the grace of God. So I started watching for these things during the day, and then when they would pop up, I'd be like, oh, God, I'm feeling nervous right now. So that's a gap, right? Because he told me, am I supposed to worry today? Am I supposed to worry? What's Jesus' command about that? Don't worry. Okay, well, I'm feeling worried about this. And, you know, my job is complex, and I have to create things from scratch, and I have to do presentations in front of the CEO. And, I mean, there are a lot of extremely challenging things that are part of my job. And you think I'm never worried? You think I'm never nervous? You think I'm never anxious? It's like, okay, so I'm going to just acknowledge it, and I'm going to say, hey, that's a gap. That's Brian trying to control the outcome. How much is Brian in control of in this world? Pathetically small amount. So you say, oh, here's a gap, God. This emotion is an indication that I have a gap. So I'm turning to you for grace. And I can't wait to see you fill this gap. And the result of doing this, the two things, is I was in constant conversation with God all day long. You will literally have, if you do these two things, you'll have ongoing conversations with God all day long. Anytime you're scared, anxious, worried, frustrated, anything that pops up is an opportunity to turn to the God of grace and power. And I saw God doing incredible things during this time. I mean, it was so much fun. All the grace and power of God are found on the other side of surrendering to his grace. And celebration because you get to experience God. You will start to experience God if you do this. So that's why I was celebrating. It's just what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul wrote about some problem he had in his life. We don't know what it was, but he described it this way. He said, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, whatever this thorn in the flesh he called it was. But God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And I put gaps. That's my addition, not in the Bible. But did you notice what is associated with grace again? Grace is power. And power shows up only when we have these weaknesses or gaps. So Paul said, I boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses or my gaps, my word, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Because here's the ultimate choice that you have to understand that I'm asking you to consider today. You can live each day in the power of God, or you can live each day in the power of you. Your choice, every day. Great. So I talked all about this months and months ago. I had all these amazing adventures, and then I tripped. And that's why I'm doing this message. I tripped. What I never let go of from March on was this, surrender. I never let go of that. So I have continued for month after month to focus on surrendering to God, surrendering daily, surrendering all the time. I give up, I let go, I abandon outcomes. What pronoun is the only pronoun you see on that slide? Yeah. Do you hear the subtle shift that happened? I was still surrendering every day, but I was no longer relying on him. And somewhere along the way, I set aside my gap list and I stopped turning to him during the day for grace when things were going wrong. And I wasn't conscious that I'd done it. I just did it. There was not like a day where I decided I'm not going to do this anymore. As I stopped all of these things, then my life felt heavy, hard, impossible, started failing again, started feeling very stressful again, because these are your two choices every day. You know what the power of you will always bring you? Failure, fear, stress, and anxiety. It will always bring you that list. It's exactly what I experienced again. But you know what the power of God will bring you? Peace and joy and victory and personal interaction with him. That's what he's offering us. It's interesting because in Galatians, it literally says this. Paul wrote to these Christians, he said, if you're trying to make yourself right with God by keeping the law, you've been cut off from Christ. Look at that last sentence. You have fallen away from God's grace. Has that happened to you? Did you used to rely on him more? It's exactly what happened to me. One author said, you step out of the realm where grace operates and step back into a system of self-effort. So here's why I'm doing this message. When the congregation was dismissed, many of the Jews and devout converts to Judaism followed Paul and Barnabas, who talked with them and urged them to continue in the grace of God. I'm urging you to start to live in and continue in the grace of God. That's what I'm urging you to do. Don't make my mistake. Now, the good thing is, God is incredibly kind. He was just literally waiting for Wednesday. He literally was just waiting. I'm sure he was just sitting there having going, do, all right. Actually, he wasn't. He kept giving me lots of little cues, and now that I can see what I did wrong and look back, I can see all the times he was trying to get me back. All the times. But the moment I went back to my gap list, I literally pulled this thing out. I started updating it, putting in all my things, and it's like every morning I want to bring my gaps to you so I can participate in your divine nature through grace. And then during the day, paying attention to those triggers. And it's amazing how many triggers you have. I probably have 10 times a day easily where something bothers me, makes me upset, makes me concerned, makes me worried. And I'll just immediately bring it back, So I'm back surrendering, but the surrender isn't the focus. It's surrendering to his grace, and his grace is the focus. And the result was instant presence, peace, his love in my life. Things immediately started changing again, and personal interaction with God, because the day I did this, Wednesday, and everything went back, that night I got a phone call from someone who I dearly love. She's a stay-at-home mom with 2 young kids, and she called to tell me that her husband had just found out, happy holidays, you won't have a job come January 1st. So their only source of income is gone. 2 young kids, what are they going to do? Well, thank God she called me on Wednesday and not on Tuesday. Because now normally, because I care so much about this family, I would have been stressed and anxious and worried and scared and all that, right? All the normal things that you have in a reaction situation like that. And now I was like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity for me to trust in the grace of God. So I can't do anything about it. I'm Everett on the court with the ball. I'm not Duncan. And you're not either. So because I have a really strong relationship with this person, I sent him the link to that video that I literally had just watched this morning, and I said, just watch this. And we talked that night, and I said, all I want you to take away is you got a gap. And it's a gap you can't fill. You want to know the real truth? God isn't expecting you to. He wants you to bring that gap to him and trust him. We talked the day after, and I couldn't believe how calm she was. 3 days, and then yesterday we talked again for a while. She has so much faith. No fear, no anxiety, no worry, but just this expectation of the God of the gaps showing up in her life and doing what she cannot do on her own. So let me just be clear. This is not a try harder message. This is a receive message. You can receive grace. Is that clear in your mind? Do not walk out here and think it's trying harder. It isn't. You can try all you want. Take it from the king of trying. You will fail. The point of grace is to give you the life you are meant to have. So 2 things I would highly encourage you to do is start an I'm powerless list, a gap list, and list the things that you know you can't do. You've tried. Your powerlessness is critical to the grace of God, because if you think you can, he won't intervene until you think you can't. You have to get to the end of yourself. The end of your rope is where God is. And then surrender that area to you. Ask for his grace and power to fill the gap. And then watch for your emotions during the day. This is my favorite one again. I absolutely love this because it means I'm in constant ongoing conversation with him again. I have personal interaction with him again. So you feel anxious, upset, frustrated, whatever it is, use those as triggers to turn back to God for his grace immediately. Do not try and fix it on your own. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish up today. I want you to know more than anything what that verse said, continue in his grace. Continue in his grace. You and I have the opportunity to remain in his grace every day and to experience this wonderful God and his power. Remember, grace is power. Where do you need power to be different? Make your own list. But more than that, and what I really want you to try is this week, every time you catch yourself being anxious, scared, frustrated, angry, any of those emotions, use it as an immediate opportunity to turn back to him, to the God of grace, and participate with his divine nature. That's what I really want to challenge you to do. For some of you here, and you may be exploring your faith or watching online, and I talk about this God as a personal God you can know. Oh yeah, that's what I mean to do. He is the most real thing in this world. And the closer you draw to him, the closer, everything will begin to change in your life. You won't have to make a change, he'll change it. And if you want to know him, then Jesus is the key. It's through Jesus Christ that we can receive his gift of saving grace. If you want his gift of saving grace, you can have it right now. You just have to cry out to him. You have to get to the end of yourself and say something like this. Say, God, I am powerless. There's no way I can undo the things I've done that are wrong in my life. No way. But Jesus, I've heard that you died on the cross for me to pay my debt and that you rose again. So I quit trying. I can't earn it. I'm just asking for grace today. Please forgive me and come and make your home inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this service today. We hope as a church and pray that this was something that really helps connect you deeper to Jesus. That's what we're all about as a church. If you need to communicate with us, if you go online to penuelchurchlife.com, in the upper right-hand corner is a box that says, I said yes to Jesus. It also says, please pray for me. Just click on that, and it'll take you to a place where you can communicate with us as a church. So if you ever want any of the resources we mentioned in a service, go there and let us know. We'll gladly send them to you. Or if you made a decision to say yes to Jesus or you have a prayer request, just let us know. And we're always glad to hear from the people who are watching online. And if we can continue to help you grow in your faith in any way, then we want to do that. So again, thank you. And our prayer is that you continue to grow and connect and find the true life that Jesus Christ is offering.